Welcome, everyone, to the St. Augustine Chronicles. My name is Karen Zander. I did this podcast a few years ago, and then COVID hit, and it was really difficult to get guests to come in to talk to. So I'm so excited to bring this back. I love talking to people, just really ordinary people that I find interesting. They've led interesting lives. They have interesting stories to tell, and I want to give them an ability to talk about themselves and create kind of a living history of this cool city that we live in. So that's the St. Augustine Chronicles. Thank you for tuning in. Our sponsor is the Kookaburra Coffee. Proudly founded in St. Augustine in 2012, the Kookaburra is your local home for fresh roasted coffee and made from scratch baked goods. From legendary Aussie meat pies to scones and sweet pastries, everything is crafted to pair perfectly with their signature coffees. Whether you love a smooth, flat white, a bold Aussie iced coffee, or their famous Honey Badger latte. With multiple locations throughout St. Augustine, the Kookaburra is part of the community and part of your daily routine, from morning commutes to weekend strolls. The Kookaburra, Aussie coffee, St. Augustine local. And here's a little insider local tip. We call it the Kook. Our other sponsor today is my brokerage, 97 Park, residential and commercial real estate. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in property in St. Augustine? Trust 97 Park, your local residential and commercial real estate experts. From historic homes to business spaces and investment properties, 97 Park delivers market knowledge, smart strategy, and personalized service every step of the way. And when you're ready to make your move, contact me, Karen Zander, directly at 904-297-3471. 97 Park, real estate done right, right here in St. Augustine. You may have noticed a little local bent to our sponsorship because this show is all about locals. So my guest today is Greg Lepera. He's the former General Curator at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm. Greg is also now, post that career, he does real estate photography. He's fantastic. So that's how I met him. Greg, I always start out by asking people, what the heck brought you to St. Augustine?
My cousin and my dad. My dad had been here back in the 50s with some friends. They took a trip to Miami, and he fell in love with it. And in 1970, my cousin moved here, opened a little restaurant.
Which restaurant?
It was called Mario and Chickies. It was originally Colley's across from, what's the shrimp place on the island? Osteen's. It was across from Osteen's. It's where Black Fly used to be. Mm-hmm. I guess they're moving now. So they were there for many, many years.
It's funny because my mother lives in the community where Chickie lives. She was her neighbor.
Really? Mm-hmm. Really? Over off Pope Road? Over in that area? Or the one?
On the island.
On the island. Yep. So she originally lived off Pope Road. Actually, they originally lived over near Kon-Tiki. You remember Kon-Tiki?
Yes. Going way back. I don't know how
many people remember Kon-Tiki, but so we had moved to South Georgia, and it was kind of a rural community. My dad worked with paper companies. He was a personnel manager, they called them back then. I think they're human resources now. So, and at the time, most of our relatives were 8-10 hours away. So having someone within a couple hours was nice. So they were our closest relatives. So we started coming in 1970 and started spending a lot of time here and fell in love with it. So.
And did you love the St. Augustine Alligator Farm back then as a kid?
I had a real affinity for reptiles before that. And so that just kind of fed into it. So.
What does that mean? A real affinity to reptiles? Like what as a kid? What does that mean?
I have long involved stories. I don't want to bore you, but
no, that's what we're here for.
I have a lot of very early memories, and I didn't realize most people don't have memories as early as I do. My first memory is my first birthday party, and I have a lot of memories from that time till the time I was 3.5 before we moved. I was born outside of Philadelphia, and I have a lot of memories from that period. One of them is that we went to the Philadelphia Zoo, and my parents had one of the big carriages with the white wheels. Remember those?
Yeah.
And
more like a pram or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was probably 2-3 years old, maybe 2. And I remember standing up in that pram and coming face to face with a gaboon viper in the zoo.
So what's a gaboon viper look like?
It's an African viper. It's got a really geometric, colorful pattern. Lots of triangles and right angles in the pattern. They're beautiful. Blues and yellows and pinks and lavenders. They're spectacularly colored snakes. And they have these two little horns on their nose. And I remember standing there looking at this thing, and then I saw its eye move. And they don't move their eye much. There's just a very slight little movement in snakes.
You say eye. Do they move independently?
They can move them independently.
Oh.
So I'm standing there as a kid, and this thing turns and looks at me, which gave me the idea as a kid that they have some level of consciousness. And then we moved to...
It's funny that was your takeaway. That would not have been my takeaway.
and that's part of the thing about reptiles. So many people have relied on these old wives' tales about them. And, you're supposed to be afraid of them. But there's really nothing to be afraid of if you're paying attention. You don't want to step on them.
Yeah, you say that.
So, and then we moved to North Carolina. And the day we moved into this little place, it was a rental before my dad bought a house. We were in this place for 6 months, so I know exactly when this was. The neighbor came over as we were moving in and said, "We saw a copperhead cross the road and go into your yard. I went to get the shovel, but I couldn't find it when I came back. So watch out. Don't let him walk around." Well, back then,
nobody cared.
3.5, nobody cared. Your kids went out in the yard. I was outside playing.
Yeah.
And I was determined to find that copperhead. And I spent, I don't know how long looking for it, but I found it. And it was behind the other neighbor's house. And those folks turned out to be like grandparents to me, and we kept in touch with them for many, many years. They didn't have any kids of their own, so I was like, they kind of spoiled me. They kind of adopted me. So I'm standing out front watching this copperhead crawl, 3.5 years old, crawl across and go by in behind some bushes, and it couldn't have cared less about me. And the neighbor came out. We called him Shug. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching that copperhead." And he went and got a shovel and killed it.
So copperheads are
venomous.
Okay.
They're venomous, yeah. And they probably account for more, they do account for more bites in the United States than any other snake because they're really heavily camouflaged. They're hard to see. And so it's not uncommon for people.
Do we have them here?
Good question. No. Yes. So they're not native to St. Johns County. The closest that you could see them is if you drove up 95 and went into South Georgia up near Savannah. Or if you drove west of Tallahassee. They're along the Apalachicola River and west into the Panhandle. So in Florida, in the peninsula, there should be no copperheads. However, there's a local facility where a gentleman brought in a bunch of plants out of North Carolina. And the last I heard, they found a dozen copperheads on that property. So there is a population here, maybe. It's isolated. They've been trying to eradicate it. I don't know if they found any recently, but when people used to say, "I saw a copperhead," I'm like, "No, you didn't." But now I have to question that. So maybe we have copperheads, but they're in a very, very tight little place, not in St. Augustine proper, but in the county.
One more thing for me to worry about.
so I got all these stories. "Oh, you got to watch this. They're going to kill you. They're going to chase you down. They're going to bite you, And then we took this carcass and he put it in a little metal pot that he had there, like a little tri-legged hanging pot, And he
Are you going to cook it up for dinner?
He said, "No." He said, "You watch. Now, that's not going to die till the sun goes down. It's going to keep moving." And this snake was wiggling. They have nerves that keep firing, And so I watched it. And like 10 minutes later, it stopped moving. So I'm like, okay, it didn't chase me. It didn't do anything. It died in just a few minutes.
But why do they not die? Why do they keep moving?
Their nerve impulses keep firing for a while.
Is that a snake thing?
It's a snake thing, yeah. And so they keep twitching for a little while, but it stops. And it has nothing to do with the sun going down, And so this thing stopped moving after a few minutes. So I'm thinking, adults really don't know anything about snakes. I was learning that there was this fear and, this concern. And from what my personal observations, those things weren't really coming true. And we moved 6 months later to another house, and I was playing with some kids, local kids, and there was a rough green snake in the yard. I'm not in the yard, but it was in the crack of a car door. It stuck its head in. So we were in the yard and we saw this snake, and we went to get the owner of the house, the little girl's parents, and they came out and they said, "Oh, it's a green snake. It's fine." And they took it out of the door and they handed it to us. So we were playing with it, and the other neighbor, the next door neighbor, Maury was his name. His father was mowing the lawn, and he saw us, and he said to me, "Put the snake down." And I did, and he ran over it with a lawnmower.
I accidentally ran over a snake once with a lawnmower, and it wasn't pretty.
It's not pretty.
No,
it's not pretty
and stinky and icky and ugh.
Yep. So I couldn't understand that either. I'm like, why did he? I knew the snake was harmless. I was holding it, but he had this need to kill it, and I didn't understand that. So that's where my fascination came from. Those three events, from the time I was 3 to 4-ish.
And so, did you have snakes or reptiles as pets growing up? Did your parents
I've
let you
had
do that?
snakes in the house since I was 6 years old. So we're looking at 55 years of snakes in the house. My mother was maybe not encouraging, but understanding. My dad was, like, if you're going to keep these things, you need to know about them. And he subscribed me to some of the they were scientific journals back then, but they were very different than they are now. Today, if you look at those things, there's a lot of mathematical formulas and all kinds of very interesting, but way over my head type analyses. And, back then it was like, hey, we found this new animal. Here's what it looks like.
It's like National Geographic kind of stuff.
It was no real pictures or anything like that, but they were, written accounts of new species and interesting things that people observed. So quite a different experience to look at those journals nowadays.
So you say snakes in the plural. How many did you have as a kid in the house? As a mom, I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around this.
If my mom would answer that, she would say 1 or 2. I think there were times I had dozens in the closet.
Oh my God.
So I had them in little cigar boxes with pins holding. It was not good. It was not good at all.
And were any of them truly dangerous?
No. Although I did bring a copperhead into the house one time, a baby copperhead that I found. But I was a teen back then, and it was only just to look at it and mess with it a little bit. But we didn't handle it. We just were looking at it.
So how did you go from that to being the general curator at the Alligator Farm? How does that work?
I went to art school for scene design, for theater and illustration. And
why did you not go to school for something involving snakes?
Well, those were my two interests: art. I drew and painted, and I took art courses my whole life. So that seemed to be a career path that I quickly realized I didn't like. So. That industry at the time had a lot of drugs involved, and you were really committed to. Let's say it was a play. You were there on the. I did crew type work and design, and you were really committed to many long nights. Let's just say.
Yeah.
It was really intense, but then you didn't really have a job after that was over. So it was very. Insecure.
That's like my industry. It's very intense during transactions, and you close, and you have no job.
Nothing,
you start over.
Nothing. You gotta look for the next best thing. So, my parents finally moved here to St. Augustine, and I was living up in Savannah at the time. And I came and I spoke to Mark Wise at the Alligator Farm. He was the general manager back then. And after the conversation, he offered me a job. Okay, I can move in with my parents and I can start soon.
And what was the job? Just
I was a reptile keeper lecturer back then.
And so what does it mean to be a reptile keeper? What are your responsibilities?
You've got a selection of
feeding
animals. Feeding, cleaning. Nowadays, you look at a lot of things. You want to try to keep the animal's health as best as you can. So there's veterinary work. You may have to give injections. You may have to deworm an animal.
Were they affiliated so closely with the University of Florida back then?
We
were they doing their own
had
stuff?
affiliations back then. We had Dr. Kent Vliet doing his research there on alligator behavior. We had connections to a gentleman named Dr. Walter Offenberg, who would come over and bring students over and did some alligator research there as well. He's the guy who wrote the initial book on Komodo dragons. He dragged his family to live on Komodo for like 18 months.
Where's Komodo?
Komodo is near. It's kind of in the archipelago of Southeast Asia, all those little islands, and it's near Flores, and not too far from Borneo and Rinca. You know where that curve kind of comes down? It's where it flattens out. It's one of those little islands.
Were they only native to that island originally then?
There's 2 or 3 islands where they were native. And they can swim, so they would swim.
They can swim?
Yeah, they swim.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he
that
lived
kind of
there.
Freaks
he
me
lived
out.
there with
I wouldn't want to see
young family.
Oh.
Dragged his family there. We talked to his son Kurt occasionally, and I think he was a little traumatized by it. And he's like, "I'm not doing any work with giant reptiles. I'm only going." So his life work was with snails. So he went in that direction. So.
How big did Komodo dragons get?
They're the heaviest lizard. A Komodo full of food could weigh probably close to 300 pounds.
Oh my! I had no idea.
Get close to 11 feet long, maybe not quite long. There's a longer lizard. The crocodile monitor gets longer, but they're very, very slender, and a lot of that length is tail, whereas Komodos are really
they're hefty,
bulky,
beefy,
hefty,
scary,
and venomous.
Are they aggressive?
They can be. Yeah. The folks that go and visit often carry these little forked walking sticks with them, with a little notch in the end, so you can kind of push them away if they.
Does it work though? I mean, it seems like
to work. Yeah.
Oh, because I would think that if you push them away, they'd be like, "Nah, yeah."
I haven't visited. I have a lot of friends who've been there, and it's an adventure. So it takes a lot to get there. There's a lot of boat rides involved, and a lot of planes to get there. It's very remote.
How did Komodo dragons get from there to being so widespread? Then just swam on their own, or did they hike?
There were giant monitor lizards historically back tens of thousands of years ago. There was a giant one that was in Australia that was probably 16, 18 feet long. You know, big bulky animals. So a lot of those things could move and swim and go from island to island, do island hopping, or get caught on a raft and float somewhere. So they were able to disperse.
What are the lizards in South Florida? Those monitors? What are those? The ones that are all over.
So many invasive lizards, 50 plus.
You know the ones I'm talking about that are like.
There's several big ones. There are green iguanas.
Iguanas, that's what I'm thinking of.
They can get 6 feet long. There are spiny-tailed iguanas that get to be 4.5 feet long. They're bulky. They're pretty heavy duty lizards. We've got things like basilisks that are probably 2.5, 3 feet long down there. But there's literally 50 invasive species of lizards there. And we've got new ones moving into our county. I documented a population of the Peters Rock iguanas downtown.
Downtown
on Malaga Street down there.
Where?
A friend called me and says, "What is this thing?" And I went and looked. They were in that little park in front of the fire station right there.
I used to live 2 houses from that, by the way.
Did you really?
Blake lives pretty close to that.
You would know these lizards if you saw a male. They're spectacular. They've got kind of a yellowy orange head. Some species have a bright red head. These are kind of orangey. They've got blue on their body and then kind of a lighter colored tail.
You getting this, Blake?
We got the thumbs up.
So that means someone must have dropped one off there or two or whatever. Like, how do they just get to that?
We have so much traffic up and down 95, that it's very conceivable that somebody had one that popped into their car. They're often in parking lots down in South Florida, and they're everywhere. They've really exploded down in the Miami area, but they're also in Sanford. So they're moving along.
My sister used to live in Delray and West Palm, and I'll never forget the first time I went down there and just walking around. I think we were going to her community pool or something, and all of a sudden these lizards came into the pool and laid on the chairs, the lounge chairs, and it was like, what the
they need the sun too,
because we had no concept of what was going on. They just more of them kept coming, and it was just
they're here
thing.
And they're here to stay. We get cold snaps, and they are often tropical species that are affected by that. But even in South Florida, you've heard about iguanas falling out of the trees during cold events. Usually they get a little cold sun, but then they recover. But they could succumb to a freeze, and a freeze will knock them back. But they're here to stay. I had a friend who did removals on Key Biscayne. There's an old zoo location there with some old cages that are defunct and falling apart. But he removed in a year close to 3,000 iguanas from that property.
3,000,
and really didn't make a dent in the population.
That's a crazy amount per day.
It is
3,000. And what do you do with them when you remove them?
I think I don't know specifically what he was doing, but I'm sure they were euthanized.
Is that a formal process, or is that just whacking something over the head?
There are recommendations. What he did, I don't know. But there are veterinary folks who are concerned with animal welfare who make recommendations on how to do it humanely.
So what happens when people come and take alligators out of community ponds? You know, are those euthanized as well?
And they may not tell you that when they come. The animals that are under 4 feet long are supposed to be relocated, and generally they are, but it's hard to get a trapper out for a 4-footer because the only money that they get comes from selling the hide and the meat. So they're not paid by the state to do that. They're licensed by the state, so they pay for a license. They are then dispatched by the state. The state has a phone number you can call for nuisance alligators.
Oh, I did not know that.
And so they'll try to make a determination if it's something that needs some attention or if it's just an animal that showed up, because they are. They're all over the place. They show up quite regularly in places you don't expect them. And usually if you just leave them alone, they're gone and you never see them again. But sometimes people feed them and they start acting interested in folks, and they see somebody and they swim right toward them. And, those are animals that have been fed and probably need to be removed so they don't cause a problem. But the trappers, will often tell people just so they don't create any problems on site. Oh yeah, we're going to take him to a new home, and we'll take him to the alligator farm, which doesn't happen.
Well, I always wondered because there must be diseases that could be imported into. I mean, it just seems weird.
There have been several diseases with alligators that are of concern. So yes, so you could potentially move things around, but they move themselves. I mean, they're not typically stuck in any one place, and the juveniles usually move around quite a bit. They stay for the first 2 or 3 years often with their mother. So there's parental care here for an extended period of time. And
so if you're seeing a small alligator, you should assume that there's a mother.
I would assume there's probably other ones and potentially a mother there. Yeah. It's not uncommon for us to see hatchlings and, yearlings that are, a foot 18 inches long, and then some that are, close to 3 feet long in family groups with a mother.
Tell me about the life cycle of alligators. How many babies I don't know if that's the right term, but the offspring
babies work.
Yeah. Does an alligator typically have? Are they single births? Are they multiple births?
They lay eggs. They lay eggs in a nest. The nest is a pretty sizable affair. And
where are the nests?
The nests are usually up away from water so they don't get flooded.
Are they in forests or are they open out?
Usually they're close to the water. The mother has to go back and forth on the water. So usually they're not too far, but they like to get to an elevated location a little bit.
How big are alligator eggs?
The eggs are about the size of 2 chicken eggs, maybe. They're about
so small.
Like that. So they're not huge. And they lay usually 15 to 60 eggs is
my gosh.
That's in the literature. I've seen an animal lay 4 eggs, so that might be on the low end. That was a very young female. I don't think the eggs are fertile, if I recall. So, yeah, they can have a lot of babies. Some crocs can lay 90 eggs. Big saltwater crocs.
And how long does it take for the eggs to?
About 60 days, but it depends on the species. Some of the South American caiman can take over 100 days to hatch.
And then do most of the offspring survive or no?
The general thought is that most of them don't make it very long because they're bite-sized. And
eagles and other types of things?
Usually it's like egrets or even turtles or other alligators sometimes. But yeah, the thought is that very few make it past the first year. Once they get a little size on them, they're in much better shape to survive. And once they're 4 feet long or so, usually the only thing that bothers them at that point are other alligators. And the big males don't like them around, and that's one reason the small ones move around. They stay with the mother, and then when they get to be about 4 feet long, they're a threat to the babies. So the mother chases them away because a 4-foot alligator eat a hatchling in a second. So the mother moves them along, and then they have to avoid big males who've set up territories. So those are often at that size the ones you see that show up in yards or community ponds or places like that.
How much do alligators have to eat daily or weekly?
Not a whole lot. They're cold-blooded. So they eat very little because they're not using that fuel to heat their body. So, a really big alligator could eat 50 pounds of food in a year and still gain weight. So they don't need a whole lot of food. And they can go months. I had a wild-caught alligator that was one of the few of the trapper-type animals that was rescued. And it was because it was so big. It was 13 and a half feet long. And that animal was captured by a trapper, sold to Arthur Jones. We got it from Arthur Jones. You know Arthur?
No.
He developed the Nautilus bodybuilding machines.
Oh, really?
He's a multimillionaire. He developed a runway over near Ocala that's now an airport community.
Yeah, I know. John Travolta lives there, right?
Yeah. So on that property, he had well over 4,000, close to 5,000 crocodilians down there at one time. That's where Gomick came from. Gomick was on the property. He brought in 80 elephants at one time. He had 80 elephants there. He had rhinos. He had giraffes. Interesting guy.
Seems like the state might not.
Oh, he was all permitted.
Oh, really?
Everything was on the up.
That's a big operation.
It was a huge operation. Yeah. And so the alligator farm bought that facility. We got that big alligator as part of that. And when we moved him, those big ones don't like to be touched and moved. And he did not eat for 18 months.
Let's go back to they don't like to be touched and moved. So
we have to do that. But
yeah, so
but some of them get pretty stressed out by it.
So are they? Do you shoot them with a stun gun or so, or whatever? How do you initially?
Usually we rope them. So, I use a pool net pole that I can extend 16 feet. I put a noose around
16 feet's enough. I feel like that's pretty close.
I don't want them to run. I don't want them to panic. And when you get close to them, they often, especially if they see the rope, they know exactly what you're going to do. And the captive ones anyway. And so that gives me just a little bit of distance so they don't assume that I'm doing what I'm doing. So,
and run towards you or away from you generally?
Away from me. Yeah. And so we put a noose around them. We try to get it around the neck and around the front leg so that we're not putting a lot of pressure on the neck.
Why are they not aggressive when they see that? Are they just typically not aggressive?
Not aggressive. They're ambush predators. So if they know that that they're there, they usually don't do anything. Now some crocs don't care. Some crocs will launch themselves at you. They can some and some crocs are regular predators on humans.
But we don't have crocs in the wild here, do we?
We do.
Oh, we do?
Yeah. We have American crocodiles in South Florida.
But here, I mean.
Not in St. Augustine, no. Although I hear rumors sometimes, but I've never seen anything valid. So right now there have been American crocs documented up into the Merritt Island area on the south end of that county. Mm-hmm. And over on the west coast, they're regularly spotted in Sarasota, Sanibel, and I think there was one in Tampa not too long ago. Northernmost part of their range, they're mainly a Caribbean and North-South American animal. There are big populations on the Yucatan Peninsula, northern South America, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Cuba. They're in Cuba. So they get big too. They get 14 plus feet. They're big animals.
Yeah, that's big. So I want to go back to your time at the alligator farm. Well, I can't wrap my head around getting close to or trying to manage anything about the venomous snakes or the alligators. I can't wrap my head around going, yeah, I'll do that. I just can't wrap my head around that.
I hired a lot of people, and I found that if I could find folks who had a fascination from when they were 3 or 4 years old, that it was really something they wanted to do. And I think, a lot of kids are interested in dinosaurs initially, and that kind of goes into reptiles and as living dinosaurs, although birds are living dinosaurs, not alligators, but I think.
But they do look prehistoric.
They look prehistoric, and so, if you've got that interest and you've got a fascination, and it's really a fascination, their biology is interesting. Their behavior is amazing. A lot of them are beautiful. I mean, have you ever, we were talking about Komodo earlier. There's a blue viper on Komodo that's just spectacularly beautiful. And it comes in 3 phases. There's a green phase, this kind of powder. It's brighter blue than your 904 logo. And they've got red eyes, kind of orangey red eyes. So you see these things, and they're just really pretty.
Yeah, I do think snakes can be beautiful. I agree with that, but I just can't wrap my head around going, yeah, I'll go in there and do that. I'll go in there and get close to them. I'll go in there and touch them. Like, I can't.
But you don't need to touch them. I mean, we use tools for venomous snakes. We use snake hooks, and if I need to restrain an animal, we use different sized acrylic tubing and get them to crawl in the tube and hold them in the tube so they can't turn around. You have to choose the proper size tubing so they can't turn around.
But don't you have to get close enough to make that all happen?
Well, but they're not going to attack you. I mean, they're just.
You say that, but cottonmouths can be pretty aggressive. I know.
No, that's the thing. Matter of fact, there's a site on Facebook called Cottonmouths Not Chasing People, and they've tried to encourage people to post aggressive cottonmouths on there, and all of the posts are these things running away from them. I mean, I've been around. I'm not joking. Thousands of cottonmouths.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Thousands of cottonmouths. I've never seen one that would come toward me. They'll display. They'll open their mouth. They do a gaping behavior, which is where the name came from, the inside.
Yeah.
Their mouth is light colored.
Yeah.
So
I've seen it.
If you're in a dark swamp and they open their mouth, they vibrate their tail, which sounds like a rattlesnake. They thump it like that. If they're in leaves or something, it sounds like a rattle. So they're just not mean. They just want to be left alone. And when you realize that, and you realize that they begin to know you, and after a few times they recognize you, you're bringing food, you're bringing water, you're cleaning, but you're not bothering them. You're making them move over. You're gently hooking them and taking them out of the exhibit. Once they realize that, they tend to know you.
So that's kind of interesting to me, the brain, like I have dogs, and obviously dogs are smart. You can tell, and they seem like they have emotion, and I mean, maybe it's just transference from what I want to see in a dog, but but I never thought about that with reptiles.
They're smart. They're trainable. They have spatial understanding. I did some training with crocodiles over the years, and you can teach them to come on a command. They learn it anyway. I mean, they know when you're coming with food because they hear the food bucket. They hear the handle of the 5-gallon bucket go over, and immediately is associated with food. They start coming over.
What's their strongest sense? Is it smell or hearing? Or
probably sight.
Sight?
Yeah, they're highly visual, and a lot of their behavior is very visual. But they do smell well. They've got some glands under the throat and glands at the base of the tail that secrete kind of these. I have trouble smelling it unless somebody tells me. I smell that, and then that's what you're smelling. But it can smell kind of citrusy sometimes with certain species. Like I think the strongest smelling one are these little 6-foot caiman from Brazil and in that area. They're called broad-snouted caiman, and their glands smell like a sour orange to me.
Now, I have to tell you, I've been to the St. Augustine Alligator Farm a few times. I love it, but I never got the sense that there was a citrusy smell there.
It's overwhelmed by the well water smell.
Yeah, there's a smell there, but I wouldn't ever say that.
And then in the spring when all the babies in the bird rookery hatch, there's a certain ambiance out there from those guys too. So you probably wouldn't notice it in those situations. So, and you'd have to be pretty close, or you'd have to, like I said, I usually don't smell it until somebody points it out. I've got a friend who's very sensitive to it. He's like, "You smell that?" Like, yeah, I do now. Yeah. We were talking about intelligence.
Yeah,
so
I just never thought about the intelligence.
There was a project at the farm one time where they had different colored poles, little bamboo poles, and they had a group of caiman, and each caiman was trained to come to a specific color. When you put the pole down, it would come over to its own color. We had alligators. I worked at the zoo in Jacksonville too. They recruited me, and I was up there for
I didn't know that.
Almost 15 years.
Did you work both places or
just one? I made the trip up there for a long time. I'm not a fan of Jacksonville anymore.
Yeah, well, who is when we live in St. Augustine, right? We don't talk about that place.
I don't want to go up there anymore. Anyway, we did some training with crocs there. We had alligators that would station themselves when we were doing feedings. They would all lay in the same order every time.
That's fascinating.
We had gators trained. These little crocs trained to come into a holding area, and we'd lock the door so we could get in and clean. And then we did a thing with mambas. We had West African green mambas, and we trained those to come to a tapping cue because you can't call them. They don't hear very well. They don't have external ears. They probably can hear loud noises, but I think they mostly are picking up vibrations.
I was just going to say they probably sense
So
it.
we had a pretty sizable exhibit with some relatively young hatchlings in there, and we were having trouble getting them to feed. So we had all these branches. They live up off the ground mostly. We had all these places for them to climb, and we started tapping on the branch to get their attention, and realized they would feel that vibration coming down, and they would turn and look at us and come and grab some food. And so we built on that, and we trained them as they got older. We had some little shift boxes on the back for them to go into, and we could close them off so we didn't have to handle them. And we trained them to go into those boxes, and it was a pretty neat experience. And then we trained there's a little water snake in South Florida called a mangrove salt marsh snake.
Yeah,
they're smallish.
Yeah,
and they're highly variable. Some are almost black, some are almost yellow, some are really a pretty orangey red.
Did they change their color based on their surroundings?
If it's hot or cold, sometimes reptiles will change a little bit. Usually they'll get more colorful if it's really warm. If it's cold, they tend to darken up a little bit. But I don't know that it's like a chameleon where you see these pretty dramatic changes.
Is it maybe to have the sun absorb more of their?
That's my thought.
Heat?
And you see like some there are these little vipers that enter in Europe, the Arctic Circle, and a lot of those animals.
There's snakes in the Arctic.
Not the Arctic, just the Arctic Circle.
Well, still, that's really far north.
It's pretty far north. They have, a short summer, and those
they do.
need to hibernate. But yeah, they go up into the Arctic Circle.
So they must not eat for
and we have
months.
several rattlesnakes that go into Canada too. So they can somewhat handle cold, but those animals tend to be darker, and I think it's exactly what you were thinking. That they're able to absorb more
heat from
radiant energy when they're dark like that. So we trained these little snakes. They were often, we had an exhibit with water with some fake mangrove trees out there, and we'd tap, and they would immediately turn and look, and they would come out of the tree, cross the water, come onto the land portion, come over to us. And we didn't want them just to come for food because they could be in a relatively aggressive mood, thinking they're going to get something to eat. So we trained them to be picked up and touched. We trained them to crawl into a little container that was sitting on a scale so we could get a weight on them.
That's
it was pretty neat. It was pretty neat. I did a presentation years ago for the International Herpetological Symposium, and my group up there won an award for those projects. So I was pretty thrilled. The Joe Laszlo Memorial Award for
Good for
excellence in herpetoculture or something like that.
An award I will never win. Let's just be clear. So when you go to the alligator farm or to zoos, and it seems like snakes are interacting with you, is that really happening?
It could. I see a lot of instances where it's not.
It just kind of luck of
just
it.
moving around,
Yeah.
but yeah, they could interact with it. People tend to go up and start pounding.
Yeah.
Which they find incredibly annoying.
Yeah. There's so many alligators when you go to the alligator farm. There's so many in the water, the ponds that they create or whatever. Do they not do they have to be families, or can you just throw a bunch of alligators together and they all get along?
A lot of those animals were raised together, so they've known each other since they were youngsters. It's kind of there's a balance there, when you have a lot of them, it tends to break down territoriality, so you get a little less aggression because they can be mean to each other.
That's why I'm asking. It seems like there's so many, and they're kind of all over each other.
They can be nasty to each other, and especially in smaller groups where a male starts patrolling a big area, he might exclude other animals from that. But when you've got a bunch of them in there, you tend to break that behavior down. They tend to be a little more accommodating, and that's a natural behavior because in Florida and then like in places like South America with Cayman, you get varying water levels, and there are times when the water levels are really low and the animals congregate in just a few bodies of water. So those are natural behaviors.
But it seems like they're just kind of laying all over each other, and there's not any personal space or anything.
Some of that
it's so surprising that alligators do that.
Some of that is that they are trying to thermoregulate, and there might be one spot of really prime sunlight on one side, and they'll all try to climb into that one spot of sun. So sometimes you'll see them kind of stack up.
But they're okay with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't. That's strange when I see that. It doesn't
Have you
seem
been
like
to Manhattan?
Yes. So
we got people stacked on top of each other going up 100 stories.
Yeah. So whose brilliant idea was it to create the zip line over the alligators at the alligator farm?
I don't know exactly.
I love that.
I was gone at that time.
I remember when they did that.
I think John Brugan was involved in that. So he's the director there now. I talked to him yesterday.
It's such a fantastic thing to create.
There were folks who had some concerns about that. There's some very valuable animals there, and they wondered if that would impact them. They don't care.
And let me tell you, that longer zip line, that's hard. Being 6 feet tall, it was like, I got to get down under that. It's really fun. It's just a cool way to see the alligator farm and
definitely a different perspective, isn't it?
Yeah. And going over the bird rookery and being right up there with them. I love it. It's really cool. So let me backtrack. I talked to someone recently who, I'm sure you know them. They are contractor doing some general contracting work at the alligator farm, have done it in the past, or doing it again. And he said, Karen, there's a guy there with one arm. And he has one arm because he went in one time to take care of something and the alligator took his arm off. Does that never cross your mind when you're dealing with them?
I'm really concerned about safety. And I've always felt a real responsibility to the people that I train to keep them as safe as possible. Les is the gentleman you're speaking of. He doesn't work there anymore. He works with antiques here in town. But he is missing. Oh,
that's a much safer deal.
Yeah, kind of like snails and my other friend. So he was bitten. He was working with another fellow at the end of the day, and they were scooping leaves off of some standpipes in some off display areas. And he didn't see a Cuban crocodile that was sitting right below where he was getting ready to scoop, and he extended his arm over top of the exhibit to scoop, and this big croc jumped up and grabbed his arm. And so, incredibly traumatic, life-changing.
Yeah.
I know the other fellow was there, and it still haunts him. It was not a good experience. They tried to reattach it, but it was unsuccessful. But he's a good guy. He's got a good life now. You'll see him around town. He's a neat guy. He's a good fellow.
I just have to tell you, Greg, I cannot wrap my head around. Yeah, I'll go do that with them. I just can't.
Have you seen my sheep scar? There are plenty of people that work with sheep. People work with horses, right?
Yeah.
Horses are dangerous. Horses kill way more people than reptiles. Dogs kill more people.
Dogs,
than reptiles,
yeah.
There are a lot of folks involved with dogs, a lot of veterinarians, all kinds of folks board and manage horses. So, pit bulls.
Yeah.
I had a lady one day show me her legs. She's like, "Look, I don't know how you do what you do. Look what my little pit bull did to me." And she had this horrendous bite on the back of her leg where her pit bull had grabbed her. So I think it's all kind of relative, what you're interested in, what risks you're willing to take. I think over the years I've been able to mediate a lot of those risks and create policies and procedures that kept people safe.
Well, obviously.
Because it's dangerous, and that was part of what we were doing with those mambas and training those mambas to go into the boxes. We had one mamba trained to go in, we had a lower box and a higher box. We had one train to go in the high box and one train to go in the lower box. And we came in one day and they were in the wrong box. And we tapped and they came out and they changed places. I mean, it was just, it's amazing with, and most people think of them, these mindless.
Yeah, that's what I never thought about it.
They've got home territories. They have friends. I mean, there was some work recently with rattlesnakes that showed that, the same animals come and hang out together and live in the same spots and go into hibernacula together. So they've got like little family groups and friend groups.
Do they remember or recognize their parents or their mother later or
potentially? No? There's a work that seems to indicate that all, and I can't say all, but it seems like all vipers and pit vipers stay with their mother after birth for a short period of time, somewhere between a week and 2 weeks. And they'll move with each other. The mother moves, the babies move with her, and they'll often sit and curl and sit on top of her. If the babies move, the mother will move to them. So there's something going on there. And so I would like to say yes. I can't say for sure, but I'd like to believe that, that they recognize their mom later on. There's a fellow working with, I think he may have just retired, working with pygmy rattlesnakes down at Stetson. And he posted a video recently of a mother pygmy rattlesnake with a baby, and the baby was sitting with her, and a black racer, which are predators on the baby, approached them, and the mother struck at and chased off the black racer. So there's some level of protection there, staying with their mother for that short amount of time.
So talk to me about the local legend that what happens at the alligator farm when the hurricanes come in. There's all these stories about, they do this, they do that. Talk to me about how you
put some of the birds in the bathroom.
Yeah, everybody does that though, right? All the zoos, it seems like that's one of the things that they're working on, the contractor that I talked to. They're going to create a building, not the bathrooms. They're going to create a building with stalls for each of the types of...
Yeah, they're big enough that they need to do that now.
But how do they prepare for hurricanes that are supposed to be more of a hit to us?
Well, the farm's on one of the higher points on the island.
Yeah.
And it's rarely impacted by flooding. But wind can impact it. Like during Hurricane David, when it passed by here in 1980, there was a fence in the back that blew down, and they were collecting alligators for a long time.
Oh, so it did actually happen that the alligators got up.
19, I'm pretty sure it was 1980. It might have been 79. I may be getting and I wasn't there, but I was still, when I started there in 84, we were still finding the occasional alligator. And Kent Vliet, the gentleman who's doing the behavioral studies there, had little yellow tags on their tail. And if they didn't have a little yellow tag, they had an opening in their tail on the crest on their tail where the tag was. So we could easily identify them. I found, by the way, back there, you remember Pappies? Have you been long enough to remember Pappies? Yeah. We worked with a fellow named Johnny Pappy, and Johnny was a great guy. He was an avid outdoorsman, really, really good in the field. But he would often go back and look for them. He came to me one day and said, hey, I got a big gator. I can't bring it back. Can you help me? So I went out with him, and we were pulling it along these little tidal sloughs that are back there. And suddenly I was into my waist in quicksand. And it's not like the stuff you see on television,
In the Gilligan's Island.
Because as a kid, I thought, oh my God, quicksand's going to be a terrible thing the rest of my life. Gilligan and all those shows had quicksand with something floating on the surface. All it is a spring that rounds off the sand so that the sand isn't angular and it doesn't stick together, and it kind of floats and you can sink. So I ended up up to my waist in this spring quicksand
with the alligator.
I couldn't get out with the alligator. He was taped up. He was right there. But yeah, he was right there. And Johnny had to help me out. He didn't get the vine and come over, and I looked it up, and apparently
and Ginger wasn't there either.
No, she wasn't. I didn't see Mary Ann. I was looking for Mary Ann. But I went right in that hole. I was surprised because it was hard packed sand, And then all of a sudden, boom! I was in.
Didn't you wonder, like, am I going to get out? I mean, how far is this going to go?
I didn't feel like I was getting sucked down.
No?
I mean, it wasn't like, coming up on my neck or anything. I might have gotten panicky if I was by myself.
Let me ask you, when alligators are taped up, I assume you mean their snout, right?
Yes.
Do they then, could they still be aggressive with their, what are they called? Feet, paws? I don't know.
I wouldn't worry about their feet. They can hit you with their tail. I've been knocked on my butt with a tail. I got an inch too close. And you kind of develop this. You understand, first of all, that they're like the diameter of a circle, and you try not, when you're working with them, to enter that diameter, because they could swing their head one way or the other, or they could swing their tail. And we were working with one. I actually had him already noosed, and we were going to try to get his mouth taped up, and I stepped literally 2 inches too close, and he hit me with the tail, and I went right down.
I feel like that would really hurt.
It stings. It stings. It's not too bad. But the head, even if they're taped up, a big alligator has a 150-pound head. If he hits you in the knee, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Even if he's not biting you, they could do some damage.
So. Do you miss that? I mean, you're doing real estate photography now, and like I said, you do a really good job with it. But
and I'm enjoying it. I meet some really cool people.
But it's a very pedestrian thing compared to.
Seeing all those properties is really interesting.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that.
Some cool places and cool locations.
Yeah.
And meet some neat people. There's a lot of people in town. Well, from doing this show, right? Yeah. There's some really cool people in St. Augustine. I'm involved enough to keep my interest. I have a few animals at home.
I was going to ask you. Yeah. So what's the zoo at your house look like now?
I have some smallish boas. I've got some lizards that are pretty interesting. I've got 2 sets of really very cool lizards. One is from coastal Kenya. They've got a really long tail, and they're kind of blue-green. They're really pretty. And then I've got some, the night anoles from South Africa, from South Florida. Have you ever seen those? They're related to our little green and brown anoles here, except they're, foot long. Got a big craggy head. I've got another species of those at home.
Do you have to have some sort of special license to have all that?
Not for what I have. No. There are reptiles that are called reptiles of concern, and you've got to have permits for those. Those are animals that the state's concerned about that might escape, so they want all those animals documented. And for the stuff that I have now, I've got a couple turtles at home.
That seems like a lot to not have to have a permit.
They're taking up way less space than a dog.
No, I'm just surprised that the state isn't saying, like max of 2, and then you gotta let us know or something. I don't know. It just seems. Yeah, I'm not up to speed on all things reptiles.
And how would you handle that? I mean, if you had 2 frogs that were this big, versus a Komodo dragon, which needs some space. Yeah. There are space regulations with certain species. There are class 1, 2, and 3 animals in the state, and if you've got class 1 or 2, you need to have multiple acres, either 5 or 10 acres of land for those animals. So yes, they do look at that, but not with the animals I have.
I still just can't wrap my head around getting close. I hear you. They're not aggressive.
I mean, they look at big tigers. How many big tigers?
Yeah, well, I'm not getting close to big tigers.
How many acres do you need to keep big tigers? Should you keep big tigers? That's another question. I think there are qualified people who could manage and have the funds and staff to keep big tigers. But there are a lot of people that I've seen who probably shouldn't have them, but somehow got a permit. Did you see Tiger King? I
didn't. I sort of just don't want to,
Yeah, I wish I hadn't watched it, but as I was watching, I kept saying, I know that guy.
I can imagine from your perspective, you would have viewed it very differently than most people too, right?
Well, I think a lot of the things that were happening there were not good.
Yeah, the responsible thing you have to do with animals in general. So you probably don't have just dogs or cats, right?
I have a dog.
Oh, you do? And the dog's cool with all these?
Dog's cool. Yeah. He's not cool with other dogs. but he didn't care about my turtles,
Well, thank you so much for coming in. It was so interesting. I can't tell you that you've gotten me over my, I I don't know if it's
Our
fear.
next house, I'll bring one of the boas. You can meet him.
No, no, you won't. I'll tell you what, I'll bring a golden doodle and you can meet him.
I'd love to meet your golden doodle.
That's more my style. I will say we had a dog. He was around 65 pounds when we lived on the island. And we lived in Sea Colony, and there was a lot of preserved space in there. So our lot bordered the preserve, and we used to get cottonmouths all the time when the rain came out, when it was raining, not when it was sunny. They would come out in the rain or in the dark. And that dog one time went out at night, and we were pretty sure that he tried to go after a cottonmouth, but we weren't positive. And my husband, Stephen, said, oh, he got a bite, he got a bite, it's right here. And I said, no, he's fine. So we just ignored it. We woke up the next morning, and that dog had this huge, bowling ball thing coming out of his neck, and didn't kill him. He had to have anti-venom, but I thought that a cottonmouth bite with even a 65-pound dog would have, I'm glad it didn't, would have killed the dog 8 hours, 10 hours later, and it didn't. I was really surprised by that.
Size is a big factor in those bites.
I'm sure.
And, the bite itself can vary considerably. They often will do dry bites that are just defensive bites, just a little stab, get out of here. Venom is very costly for them to produce biologically, so they tend to want to reserve it for food. But in a situation, dogs are really curious about snakes.
Yeah, he wasn't the brightest dog either.
Snakes have scent glands. Some snakes can spray those scent glands. Cottonmouths spray. Diamondbacks can spray out 5 or 6 feet. This little fine mist of stink. I think some of that may attract dogs. What the heck is that? Almost every dog bite I've seen has been on the head or face. So it's pretty clear the dogs are sticking their face.
Yeah,
right
that's what he
there,
did. Like I said, he wasn't the
And I
brightest.
often hear, a snake attacked my dog. Like, no, chances
No,
are
my
that
dog attacked the snake.
Snake was probably just sitting there, and your dog put his face down there.
Yeah.
There was a study years ago with different shaped heads, and they would create these little heads and then approach wild snakes with them just to see what they would do. And the heads that almost invariably attracted a defensive bite were dog-shaped heads.
Oh, there you go.
So I think in the wild, probably coyotes and things like that were probably heavy predators on some of those animals, and they've developed that response.
That's pretty fascinating.
Just to get away from me, dog.
Well, thank you, Greg. I really enjoyed this.
Good to see you.
I can't tell you that I feel like I've had an interesting life like you've had. I feel like listening to your stories, my life has been pretty boring. So thank you very much. And thank you for bringing back the show with me. I've really been looking forward to bringing this back. So you helped me do that. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you invited me. I was a little reluctant, but
no. I really love to just learn about ordinary people or extraordinary people that don't know they're extraordinary.
I'm going to put that on my Facebook page. Ordinary guy.
Well, or extraordinary. Some people don't know they're extraordinary, and I think they are. I want to thank again the Kookaburra Coffee, our sponsor. I have to tell you, I'm a cold weather snow girl. I love cold days like today. And when we leave, I am heading to the Kook to get the best hot chocolate. They make the very best hot chocolate. So I'm going to go get a Kook hot chocolate on this cold day. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I appreciate it.